It is what it is, and what it
Yeah,
isn't, and what it was.
and what it will be.
Hmm.
Sounds like the lyrics to a Rush song. What are we talking about?
I don't know. I don't know either. Anyways, Xbox
Uh,
announced they're integrating Steam launcher things into their app.
yeah, as
As
rumored
their
or
own
leaked.
images suggested, then they pulled them and then said maybe those are not really happening, but then really did happen.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
think we all see where this is going.
yep. We also probably see how slowly it's going, but
Oh, yeah.
whatever. They'll get there eventually.
I mean, by the time the next gen console, in quotes here, launches, this stuff will all be done and ready.
Or the sun will have imploded of its own volition, you know.
There's that.
So one
We
of
can
those
only
things
be
will
so
happen.
lucky.
Yeah. Oh man.
It's late June. Dude, it is hot. It's supposed to be over 100 freedoms today, and that's too many.
Yep. Same here. It's not good.
The AC will turn off like momentarily, like in the morning, and then the afternoon it's like, no, this is just running forever.
Yep. I also had like what was probably a 1 minute or half a minute power outage over the weekend. And then I was in Massachusetts and my HomePod speaker was sending me alerts about an alarm because there's like an old alarm system here that nobody uses, but when the power goes off, it puts off the alarm. So it's good. It's awesome.
Well, since I spoke about it, and now they're doing something with it, I guess it's worth bringing up. They're making changes to Recall. They're making it. We were talking about this at work this morning.
Mhm.
It's more of a start page, if you will, instead of a
Yep.
start menu.
Hmm.
And the first thing that developers behind Start 11 said is like, we could do all this without AI. Like, we could do this real easy.
Yeah. I was, I was stuck in the car with my wife for 6 hours. Like one of the yesterday, actually it was closer to 5 hours. The drive home was better than the drive there. Anyway, but the one of the things that came up a couple of times over the weekend, because I'm seeing people I haven't seen in a while, is like how or if people are using AI. And it is still somewhat notable to me that of this group, you know, uh, the person who uses it the most is my wife.
Hmm.
And she actually uses Copilot probably more than anything and really likes it, which is not the general consensus out in the world. But yeah, I was telling her that it's interesting to me, like how much pushback there was against Recall when it was first announced. Every single other company doing AI has something exactly like this
Oh,
now.
yeah.
Everyone's using screenshots, and it seems so unsophisticated at the time. But this was another, when I told my wife about this Recall feature a year ago, and then when we were talking about it yesterday, she was like, I could really use this. And I was like, I know. People seem to be really up in arms about it, but because OCR capabilities, obviously like graphics to text, but also just well, maybe more advanced than that. Just AI that can describe what an image is, and then of course do it in reverse. So you have this set of images. There's some sort of call it a semantic index or something or
Hmm.
whatever it is. There's some basic metadata that they must Microsoft or whichever company we're talking about holds, and then where's that green pair of pants I was looking at, or they're starting to change it like per app, which I think is pretty good too. Like that new interface you were talking about, you can go in and say like, I know I was doing something in the browser or in whatever app, and then that fine tunes the view, you know. But seriously, screenshots. It's like I don't know. It's weird.
That's the,
It's weird. That's how we solve the problem. But
I think for now, right?
yeah, yeah.
This is
Well,
like, it reminds me of like the early sort of video game days, how they were using GPUs and whatnot. It was pretty brutal how that was getting done. And then obviously they're like anti-aliasing and all these other things. And
mhm,
eventually they kind of turned it into like data streams that
right.
are computational rather than just true painting. And I think that's where we'll end up eventually. And we'll look back and be like, yeah, that was pretty dumb, but it worked. So it wasn't all that dumb.
Yeah, it seems like it's getting us there. I continue to have zero use for this personally,
I
but
see that's the thing.
no, I mean, not to be worried about it, but like, I don't see all the negativity and all that stuff. Like, I don't get that, but like as far as like actually just using the feature, I mean, I've enabled it several times, used it for a while. I never need it for anything. I've never once referred to it or, on purpose other
Mhm.
than, for testing or whatever, but I don't know. Everyone has different
Yeah,
use cases, whatever.
it is what it is. You don't. It is. I don't know.
Yep.
There's a lot of good AI tools out there. I just don't know.
That's the thing. I know. I still start, you had said to me, before you went away, you were like, hey, just like use Cursor or whatever, and be like, just make make a notepad app or something. And it's like, I can't bring myself to the pain that this would cause me. But like,
Hilariously, there is a post in the forums on throughout.com
yep.
linking to a Bloomberg article from today.
Yeah, I'm actually writing about that right now. So yeah.
About how Microsoft is having trouble selling AI.
So this is the latest in a string of reports like this. Like I was just looking for this before we started. There was a Wall Street Journal report that was about something else, but it kind of had like the adoption levels of the top, like AI chatbots or whatever we're calling these things. And Microsoft was barely on they were like way down the bottom. Like it's like a non-event. But, this, we talked about this, I think, this notion that ChatGPT has become like the Kleenex of this
Yeah.
market or the Chrome or whatever. And, Microsoft always had or could rely on the Fortune 500 or whatever, the enterprise, right? And even the enterprise is like, people like they try it and then they're like, yeah, we just want to use ChatGPT. I don't think it's honestly about quality. I think people have just latched onto it. It's just it's the brand. It's the one everyone
I
kind of knows.
also think there's the Microsoft fatigue too, especially when it comes to paying an invoice. It's like Microsoft wants more money, even though it might be more cost effective. I'm not arguing that Microsoft's more
Yep.
or less expensive,
Yep.
but companies like, we're already giving Microsoft X amount of millions for Azure and all this other stuff. Now they want even more. It's like, just use ChatGPT and see if there's other tools out there that we can like. It doesn't necessarily make sense, but that's a very real thing.
Yeah. I, you know, they would get in trouble for this probably at this point, but I feel like Microsoft, I've always felt this, like when they announced I think it was Microsoft 365 Copilot was like the first one where
Mhm.
they kind of said like, we're going to charge for this thing. And it was like, okay, and how much is this going to be? And you're like $30 per user per month on top of whatever Microsoft 365 subscription they already have. And you have to be on one of the good plans. Like you can't be on the most basic plan or
We're
whatever. And
confusing
it's like,
licensing from Microsoft.
yeah, well, but also expensive. Like,
Yeah.
and look, I, I hope we're past the AI denial stage or whatever, but if, at the very least, or I think most people hopefully would agree, like the AI features you see in Microsoft 365 are on par with whatever feature improvements they would have made over the past 5 or 10 years, whatever. They're useful, but they don't necessarily change the world or whatever. It's the type of thing we used to get for free, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, I mean, not for free, you were paying for it, but you have this subscription, you get more features, more improvements over time. You get more value out of that subscription. So I feel like, and they did this a little bit on the consumer side, but you could be like, we're going to have a 10% price hike or something reasonable, but we're just going to give this to everybody. And that would make sense to me. But like $30 per month per user, I feel like the nuclear option for these guys is, if they're going to really try to take down Chat GPT, is make it free
Or like $5 or something. Yeah,
or something cheap.
30.
Yeah, something. Because at that point, it's like, look, it's Microsoft, like whatever. Like a lot of the companies would just be like, look, we're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fascinating that even the biggest companies in the world are actually not just looking at, but like using ChatGPT. This is a major brand success story. It's rather incredible.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how it's supposed to be. That's the whole thing of the American know-how Silicon Valley, right? Like you have these ideas and they get, of course. Now, the counter to that is like this company doesn't exist without billions and billions of dollars of losses. However,
Right.
that's their new model, right? Look at Uber, look at all these companies, and that's how they come to exist. Is bleed it
Yeah.
until you make it. So,
Yep.
it's worked out for Amazon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a rather extreme example, but
it is.
because it's just the amount of money involved. But I mean, look, if Microsoft walked away tomorrow It was like, we're not giving you another cent. We're done. We don't care what happens. They, other companies would swoop in to make sure they had the same amount of money. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like we're at the point now where it's like so valuable as a brand.
I mean, I don't know how
But
Microsoft internally, maybe they aren't having like a crisis moment. Thinking like, even though like, yeah, we're attached to ChatGPT through this contractual agreement or whatever, but
mhm,
like to your point,
yeah,
nobody, if nobody's really buying it at the scale that Microsoft needs, right? Like for Stardock, making $100 million a year is a ton of money, but to
yeah, yeah,
Microsoft, like that's nothing. And
sure.
so you
This is
have
a
to,
huge problem for Microsoft, actually, that you have to be successful to a level that just doesn't make sense
oh
for
yeah,
most
it's the
companies.
same with Apple too, right? It's like if it's not
Yep,
a multi-billion-dollar product, like what are we even doing?
which is why arguments to like do things like roll out or spin off Xbox over the years kind of made sense. It was like this thing might make sense as a smaller business. It's not clear how it makes sense in Microsoft. I guess where they figured it out was like we'll make it into a $100 billion business, and then it makes sense by spending all this money on it. I
Yeah.
guess, but I don't know, but I it is this is a problem, and it's interesting to me that we've just spent the past at least 3 months, if not a year, navel gazing and hand wringing over how behind Apple is in AI. um, I, Microsoft has a problem here too. They obviously have AI. I mean,
Hmm.
they're they're further ahead than Apple from the perspective of putting it everywhere and having developer tools for it and whatever. I mean, then they have the cloud platform, obviously, but this is still, I wouldn't call it existential necessarily, but it could turn into it.
Oh,
You know,
well, there were rumors that Apple was looking at maybe buying one of the larger AI companies. It hasn't happened yet,
yeah,
but
yeah. That would be, yeah. So when you were saying earlier something of whatever about Microsoft, I was thinking to myself, this is a good example of where what they do matters a lot more than what they say.
hmm.
And what Microsoft has done is bring in a bunch of new people from outside the company, start up these new businesses, do their own models, blah, blah, blah. So that you can kind of see that. If Apple were to buy, say, Perplexity is one of the big ones that they're rumored to be looking at, like that says a lot more than anything like, oh, we're a little behind on Siri or something. And it's like, really? Because if you're going to buy like Perplexity, you know, billions and billions, it could probably be one of Apple's biggest acquisitions.
Hmm.
Um, you don't buy like Next unless there's an existential threat to this company. You don't buy Perplexity and like this is you're
Which I
set
don't think there is. I don't, for Apple, let's say that they did buy them. The
right.
problem Apple has is like there's no business outside of like Siri, and Siri's not really like, so they
Well,
buy this thing and it's got this great modeling, but then how are they also they going they're not going to go into the, I don't know. I don't know
but
what.
Apple's model is never allow a customer to go use something else while pretending to make an ecosystem where that actually is a thing. Like they if they see people doing things, they want to have the Apple thing for that, and they want the Apple people to choose that thing. And even if it's not a direct money maker or whatever, if it keeps you on an iPhone and if you're on an iPhone, you're more likely to have an iPad, an Apple Watch, a Mac, or whatever it might be, Apple TV, blah blah blah, whatever. Like it's all part of it's part of the whole machination around keeping people in the ecosystem. If they did this Chat GPT thing, it's a little buried, but like you can sign into your account, you can enable it for certain things. um Apple, when that kind of happens, they don't really have a lot of oversight over it.
Yeah.
Like they would much rather have their thing and then not need OpenAI. you know so I mean, we'll see. How much how much is that control worth? We're going to find out, I guess. It'll be interesting to see if anything happens, and if so, how much they spend.
Yep. Yep. I don't know. We need to end this immediately.